much.
We'll proceed with an opening prayer and we'll call on Reverend Dr. Cyril G.K. Fayose, General Secretary of the Christian Council of Ghana, to give us the opening prayer.
Shall we remain seated and pray? Shall we pray? Heavenly Father, gracious Lord, we thank you for the graciousness of your grace and for the abundance of your love upon each and every one of us. Lord, we thank you for the showers of blessings. We thank you for journey messages from far and near to be here for this very important discussion. Lord, we thank you for your manifold blessings upon each and every one of us. Even as we come here to discuss accountability, the rule of law, and anti-corruption, Lord, we pray that you be with us. Lord, we pray that you be the chair of this function. Lead us, guide us, direct us. Grant us wisdom from above. That, Lord, all that we will do to the glory of your holy name, for the benefit of our dear nation Ghana and for the benefit of your people. Lord, we pray that through these discussions, you teach us as citizens of this dear nation to be faithful and loyal to our country. Lord, through discussions, we pray that you bless our homeland Ghana to be great and strong. So we commit all the discussants and participants unto your care. Grant us a presence of mind and wisdom to contribute meaningful to these discussions. So that, Lord, at the end of the day, the glory will be all yours and the benefit will be ours. We pray this in the name of God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
We would introduce our special guest among us here, and we have Her Excellency Diana Akonsia, Ambassador of the European Union delegation to Ghana. She came along with the heads of governance section of the delegation. We also have the chairperson, commissioners, deputy chair, and management staff of the NCC with us here. We have chiefs, opinion leaders. We have persons from the Ghana Armed Forces, Navy, and we also have our panelists and our moderator for today. When the discussion starts, they will be properly introduced, that's our panelists, they will be properly introduced to us. But at this juncture, I'll call upon the chairperson of the NCC, Madam Josephine Nkrumah, to give us a welcome address.
Her Excellency the Ambassador of the European Union, Diana Akonsia and her team, our key partners from FIA, Honorable Chairman of the Public Accounts Committee of the Parliament of Ghana, Honorable Abeji, Honorable Members of Parliament who may be present here, distinguished panelists, Deputy Chairman, Finance and Administration, and Deputy Chairman, Operations of the National Commission for Civic Education, Commission Member Hajara Rufai, Nime, Nabe, CEOs and heads of public and private institutions, youth and students groups, civil society organizations, the media, distinguished guests, once again, good morning. On behalf of the Commission members, management and staff of the National Commission for Civic Education, it is my delight to welcome you to another edition of the NCCE Dialogue Series on the subject of public accountability under the Anti-Corruption, Rule of Law and Accountability Program, ARAP, and European Union funded project. The thrust of this morning's dialogue is on the important subject of public accountability, with emphasis on abuse of office in both the public and private sector. Article 35(8) enjoins the state to take steps to eradicate corrupt practices and the abuse of power, whilst Article 41(e) enjoins every citizen to work conscientiously in the chosen occupation, and Article 41(f) further enjoins citizens to protect and preserve public property and expose and combat the misuse and waste of public funds and property. Distinguished guests, permit me to attempt to define the term abuse of office. It includes the acts of commission and omission of office holders that constitute a breach of the duties of that office, taking advantage of the power of authority or authority of the office, which amount to an abuse of the public's trust to include private sector in the office holder without reasonable excuse or justification. At one time or the other, all of us may have benefited or suffered from abuse of office simply because it has become the norm or order of our existence and in our governance structure, both public and private sector governance and corporate governance. In the public sector, and in some instances in the private sector, it finds expression in cronyism, nepotism, abuse of facilities and benefits associated to one's office, and through intrusion and collusion with private actors. It is perceived to characterize appointments in public sector as friends and family governments that have plagued successive governments under the four republics of our democratic journey. It characterizes boardrooms of both private and public corporate institutions, often resulting in poor corporate governance and the distasteful shenanigans that play out in the public space. Of course, it includes grave offenses of sexual harassment and everyday occurrences of the blaring of sirens of motorcades that usher self-styled high and mighty public servants and ministers of state. It also ropes in the abuse of time of some district chief executives who, under pretext of meetings in Accra, leave their district assembly offices on Fridays to find themselves in academic institutions, returning on Mondays, effectively 3 days of work a week. It includes the interference with systems of justice and the rule of law by bigwigs, and the list goes on. These accepted norms and practices, properly constituting abuse of office, have led to mediocrity and the weakening of institutions, with attendant weakening of structures for robust public accountability, whilst stagnating national development. It costs the nation resources and money. It pronounces the vulnerability of public office that negates sound policies and takes away the objective of service delivery efficiency to drive socioeconomic and democratic growth. The focus of our discussions today will be on the findings of our research conducted in 2017 on the public perception of the state of corruption and public accountability and environmental governance. It will continue the discussion on the research findings by today's eminent panelists within the context of the citizens' understanding of the concept of public accountability as it relates to abuse of office, the crippling of governance institutions, and governance in institutions, discussing openness in operations of public institutions, transparency in accounts, making merit-based appointments, and responsiveness to legitimate complaints. It will also examine SDG 16 as it envisages peace, justice, and strong institutions with emphasis on the following targets: promoting the rule of law at the national level and ensuring equal access to justice for all, substantially reducing corruption and bribery in all their forms, developing effective, accountable, and transparent institutions at all levels, and ensuring public access to information and the protection of fundamental freedoms in accordance with national legislation and international agreements. Of course, the role of the Public Accounts Committee of the Parliament of Ghana would also be highlighted. We invite distinguished guests to share their thoughts and insights as well. It is the hope of the Commission that today's edition of our dialogue series will endure further discussion in the media space, in workplaces, faith-based platforms, civil society organizations, and various stakeholder fora as we advocate for improved public accountability and promote responsible citizenship and true servant leadership. I would like to thank the staff of the Commission for their organization of today's event, and of course our gratitude goes to the media for enhancing the visibility of this event's understanding of the concept of public accountability as it relates to abuse of office, the crippling of governance institutions, and governance in institutions, discussing openness in operations of public institutions, transparency in accounts, making merit-based appointments, and responsiveness to legitimate complaints. It will also examine SDG 16 as it envisages peace, justice, and strong institutions with emphasis on the following targets: promoting the rule of law at the national level and ensuring equal access to justice for all, substantially reducing corruption and bribery in all their forms, developing effective, accountable, and transparent institutions at all levels, and ensuring public access to information and the protection of fundamental freedoms in accordance with national legislation and international agreements. Of course, the role of the Public Accounts Committee of the Parliament of Ghana would also be highlighted. We invite distinguished guests to share their thoughts and insights as well. It is the hope of the Commission that today's edition of our dialogue series will endure further discussion in the media space, in workplaces, faith-based platforms, civil society organizations, and various stakeholder fora as we advocate for improved public accountability and promote responsible citizenship and true servant leadership. I would like to thank the staff of the Commission for their organization of today's event, and of course our gratitude goes to the media for enhancing the visibility of this event, and most especially to the multimedia group for their live coverage. The Commission continues to express a depth of gratitude to the European Union for the ARAP grant that affords the Commission the opportunity to execute its mandate in the fight against corruption and to improve rule of law and accountability with robust environmental governance. We thank the eminent panelists for kindly accepting to share their perspectives from their rich experience on this topic. Lastly, we thank you all for availing yourselves. After all, civic education is a shared responsibility. As citizens, let us be mindful again of our duties to work conscientiously in our chosen occupation. And with that, I leave you with a quote from Webb Fezler, who said, "Good men are bound by conscience and liberated by accountability." Thank you for your attention, and God bless us all.
I would want to just mention a few of our guests who are here. We have representatives from the Ghana Police Service and the Ghana Armed Forces, and we have from the Ministry of Interior, Communications, Health, the Pentecostal and Charismatic Council, University of Ghana, Ghana Lottery Authority, Ghana Immigration Service, NHI, EOCO, National Peace Council, Ashesi University, Ghana Free Zones Board, Ghana Cocoa Board, GRA, National Communications Authority, Judicial Service, Bank of Ghana, Youth Employment, Lands Commission, International Society of Krishna Consciousness, the Gaming Commission of Ghana, Public Records and Archives Administrative Department. And we also have reps from our schools. We have Gliss, Laboni, Accra Academy, and we'll continue the rest later. So at this juncture, I would like to invite Her Excellency Diana Akonsia to give us her remarks.
Chair of the National Commission for Civic Education, NCC Deputy Commissioners, and other authorities present. I'm not going to mention all today because there are so many, so allow me to be short on the protocol. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's really a pleasure for me to be here today at the second edition of the National Dialogue on Public Accountability. Before I pass my remark, that will be short because speaking after Josephine means that almost everything has already been said, so I'm not going to repeat what she has said so well. I just would like to share some thoughts on the EU, the European Union thinking in the area of accountability. You will very often see the European Union represented in meetings that talk about accountability and fighting against corruption. And this is because the European Union is very proud to finance the ARAP program that Josephine mentioned before, and that aims at fighting corruption and improving accountability in Ghana. Why we do this? Because the European Union promotes accountability, rule of law, human rights inside the European Union as well as worldwide. Cooperation with Ghana is agreed with the Ghanaian government. It was agreed already some time ago. And both for the European Union and Ghana, it was clear that governance and accountability were going to be one of the priorities of the European Union cooperation. And that's why the EU has put 20 million euros in the ARAP program, the Ghana Anti-Corruption, Rule of Law and Accountability Program. And ARAP was designed based on the Ghana National Anti-Corruption Action Plan. Our program is therefore aligned with the objectives of Ghana. How are we delivering? I think the events that I have attended in where ARAP has helped finance have always been very impressive. I've been now in Ghana for 10 months, so I'm going towards the end of my first year. And I have been able to see how ARAP is active in the Ghanaian civil society and the outreach that it has towards all the institutions that are involved as well as the ordinary citizen. So I would really like to use this forum to thank the FIAP that executes the ARAP program because it has given the European Union an incredible outreach and it has given me personally a very good vision of what the Ghanaian society thinks about corruption and fighting against corruption. Also, another very important aspect of ARAP is the fact that it strengthens the law enforcement agencies. And this means, for example, building the capacity of the prosecutors to prosecute corruption and related offenses. It means building the capacity of the judiciary to hear and decide corruption cases. And it also means supporting the police and judiciary to combat corruption also among their own ranks. And I would like here to refer to the 2017 research that Josephine has also quoted to show how much corruption within the government agencies is a preoccupation of the Ghanaian citizen. So I think that here we are really responding to a demand which is coming of the society. But we also know that the law enforcement agencies lack the resources to deliver and have suffered from some organizational shortcomings. And so it is our ambition to see ARAP deliver some leverage for this institution to reform, to improve their efficiency, their capacity to deliver their mandates, and of course to do this beyond the lifetime of the program. In other words, I hope that the resources that ARAP puts at the disposal of the institutions will give them a certain breathing space and possibility to also reflect among the way they operate. Ladies and gentlemen, I won't be long in explaining why for the European Union is so important to fight corruption in Ghana, because it's pretty obvious, and I think in these 8 months I've already talked about it a few times before. Corruption is completely polluting the economy, is unfair, it fosters criminal behaviors. In other words, corruption is really an enemy of the government. And last week, 2 weeks ago now, we held our first Ghana European Union Business Forum, which was attended by Vice President Bawumia and by the Vice President of the European Commission, Commissioner Katainen. We talked about business climate, we talked about business and what they need, and it's clear as well that in order to generate jobs through investment, industrialization, to foster circular economy, to foster sustainable development from the point of view of environment and climate change, and most of all, to improve domestic resource mobilization, and so the possibility to invest in public goods, Ghana needs to effectively fight corruption. So a corruption-free environment is also key to business and to a positive business environment and to get investment in Ghana, foreign and domestic. But, however, at the EU, I have to say, we are very pleased with the measures taken by the government in reforming a certain number of offices and public procedures in order to increase transparency and accountability. And I want to mention again our conversation with the Vice President, because he is the champion of digitalization and of fighting against corruption, and you can see that he's really committed to this purpose. So there have been a cleaning of payrolls, there have been the process to set up a national ID, new clearing procedure at ports, the paperless port, and the digitalization of public services. And these are all measures that will improve the public climate. But I would also like to mention the historic adoption of the Right of Information Act in the Parliament, because this is going to be a fundamental step in Ghana to improve the accountability of the public officials vis-à-vis the public that will have the right to look at what they're doing. So again, I think we can say that we commend the government of Ghana because we can really see that there is a commitment, even if, of course, the fight against corruption is a never-ending fight, and we cannot say that we have won. But there are some steps in the right direction. Dear participants, I would also like to mention the special audit report of the Auditor General on the disallowance and surcharge that was published last year. And this report will help to save a substantial amount of money for the public, from the public purse. So let me encourage the Ghana Audit Service to continue its action on auditing public accounts and procedure, and to drive further the recovery of illegally acquired funds. Ladies and gentlemen, a last point from my side, which I think is very important. We are heading towards the next general elections in 2020. Today, we will hear from the panel and from you in the audience what are the issues of accountability in this country that are more pressing for you. The important question then will be to see how these findings can be used by NCCE and stakeholders to engage in a relevant public campaign on the issue of accountability, and how the duty bearers and the future elected leaders will commit to respond to these issues before and after the 2020 elections. So in other words, today we can discuss how the citizens of Ghana can contribute to the fight against corruption. And Madam Chairperson, I really would like to commend you and your staff for the work delivered so far, but probably the hardest battle now is ahead. As I said before, we are going towards election. There will be an occasion for a lot of public debate and public information in Ghana on all the issues, and including how to hold accountable those elected and future elected personnel to their citizens. So, as I said before, the fight has just started, but I am convinced that you will take this debate ahead with all the energy that you have put until now, and please rest assured that the European Union will be by your side and by the side of all the public accountability institutions in Ghana to see how to improve the effectiveness and how to to take this debate further. Thank you very much and have a very good discussion. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. We would also want to inform that the program, the dialogue, is with support from the European Union and FIAP. We have some ARAP stakeholders here also. At this juncture, I would call upon the Honorable Member of Parliament for Ketu North and the Chairman of the Public Accounts Committee of Parliament to give us brief remarks.
Good morning. The Chairperson of the National Commission for Civic Education, Deputy Chairpersons, distinguished panel members, all other protocol observed. I'm going to set the tone for the discussion on the public accountability, abuse of power and office. First of all, why public accountability? Let's ask ourselves, why? Why not private accountability, but public? Once we find the meaning, the reason why public accountability will be heading somewhere. I'm a private person. If I earn my income and I pay my taxes and I follow all the due process, comply with all the laws, whatever remain with me, whatever I do with that money doesn't concern my neighbor who is just close to me, provided that what I'm doing, using the money for, will not affect his or her peace or whatever. But for public, because we are the public, and the public belongs to us, one action of the member of that public affects the other. So when we elect officers, people, to lead us, they must account for all their actions. That is why we are here, to find out the people that we put in office, if truly they are using the resources that belong to all of us in our interests. So that is why we are talking about public accountability. Now, Article 87 of our Constitution says that there shall be an Auditor General of Ghana who shall audit public accounts of Ghana. And if you follow the clauses or the sections of the Constitution, you see the powers of the Auditor General. The power to surcharge the power not to be interfered whenever he's doing his work. All those are protected, are provided in the Constitution. But if you look at that power of the Auditor General critically, that is to audit the accounts of public offices of Ghana. We are auditing the account. So here, if you audit the account, if the accounts do not comply with the laws, the Auditor General report on it and draw the attention of Parliament that this office did not comply with the financial law, and the prescribed punishment are also provided in the laws we have. The Public Financial Management Act, the Regulation, Procurement Act, Income Tax Act, Value Added Tax Act, all of them are provided. And the punishment are all there. But the question is, if that office, assuming that that office is complying with all the laws, the financial laws, but the purpose for the establishment of that office or creation of that office has not been achieved, who do we report to? And who checked that? The NCC is created to do certain work. Resources are provided to MCC. Whether it's sufficient or not, that's a different matter. If the NCC comply with all the financial laws, procurement, they follow the procurement law, everything perfect, but they are not achieving their objective, who checks that one? There is something missing. If the DCE or MCE is abusing the office, who do you report to? I think that the panel will have to discuss this issue and let's find solution to some of these issues. Because when you talk about the legal financial laws, they are all there. That is why the Public Accounts Committee is also created under Standing Order 165 of Parliament, of Parliament of Ghana. We review the report of the Auditor General. We make recommendations. These recommendations go back to the institutions cited in the Auditor General report. There is an audit committee established under the Public Financial Management Act. That committee will ensure that the heads of the entities follow the recommendation and implement them and report back to Parliament. Thank you, Madam. And those that need to be prosecuted are referred to the Attorney General. They are punished. All those things are there. But what is lacking is what I'm talking about. Who do we report to if you see somebody doing something wrong? If I see a police officer collecting money on the road, who do I report to? Let me tell you one example. Yesterday, I was coming back from my constituency. I was getting closer to a police checkpoint. Two drivers, trotro drivers, were arrested. So the cars were parked at the roadside. And they were trying to bribe the police officer. They were using their back to face where I was coming from. Fortunately for the police officer, he was facing me, coming, a black Land Cruiser coming. He didn't know who is in that car. They were offering the money to him. He was rather questioning them or throwing his hand, talking like this, to show that he wasn't interested in what they were offering him, just waiting for me to pass. What happened behind me, I didn't know. So, whether they took it or not, I didn't know. But I suspect that after I have passed, he will take it. I've seen something like this. So who do I report to? So the panel should look at this critically. If that MC or the DC left office on Friday, came back on Monday evening, virtually working 3 days in a week, who do we report to? And who ensures that that NC or the DC does the right thing? So there's a missing link there. Let's see how we can resolve the issue. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We are still live on Joy and also on Facebook, NCCGH. At this juncture, we would invite our moderator for the discussions to start. But also, before he takes over, we have students from the Ghana-Lebanon Islamic Senior High School, Achimota School, and also Armed Forces Secondary Technical School with us. Mr. and Lawyer Samson Ladi Anyanini.
Good morning, everybody, and apologizing myself for being late. There was an emergency, and part of the act of corruption is this, that you are late when you don't have to be late. So I apologize profusely. All right. We are live on Joy 99.7 FM, and so we are reaching millions of audiences beyond this room. I'd like to introduce my guest to you right now, and then we will proceed to look at the matters that ought to engage our attention. And this being a follow-up, as you have come to understand, of what the NCC has begun on the issue of corruption and the need to eradicate it. So if you're listening on radio, this is a national dialogue on public accountability, abuse of office. And the NCC has conducted a survey out of which it is ensuring that it doesn't remain only results in the shelves, but something that we can implement and through which many people must come to know and avoid and shun acts of corruption. We're dealing and basing on excerpts from the study on public opinion on corruption, accountability, and environmental governance. Thank you very much for joining us. And our guests this morning are well able, they know their stuff, and should assist us to have a good discussion. Our guests this morning are from my left, standing here right now, is the Mr. Daniel Domelevo. He is the Auditor General of the Republic of Ghana. Certainly you do know that he's a man who speaks the truth as it ought to be spoken. In the very latest job he did, in a special audit, he exposed millions that have literally been stolen. And for the fact that he disallowed and surcharged, and most of those people have not come to claim that they are entitled, it is evidence that that was money stolen. But for his vigilance, that would still have remained stolen money. Thank you very much, Mr. Daniel Domelevo. He will share practical experiences with us and lead us to be able to correct the canker. Next to him is Clara Berry Kasati. She's a private legal practitioner and likes and loves to speak on this subject. She also is with the CDD, the Ghana Center for Democracy. Thank you very much for joining us, Clara. Next to Clara is a man who certainly needs no introduction to any one of us. He is an educationist, he is an economist, he is a writer, he's a motivational speaker, But at this point, we all know that he is the chairman of the NDPC, the National Development Planning Commission. This is a man whose sterling performance to avoid acts of corruption and abuse of office or misuse of office led to a radical transformation of one of Ghana's most important educational institution, GIMPA. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Stephen Adai, Professor Stephen Adai. Okay, so I'll take my seat and expect that my microphone will work and affect the radio as well. I am a bit unsure about that. That's why I'm holding this. I think I should get to my seat and still hold it. Right. So we should certainly begin on the note of getting a bit of an appreciation of the research that you have become familiar with in your reading and what it portends and what critically needs to be done. The World Bank says that each year about $1 billion United States dollars goes around in bribe money. But here, the focus is on misuse of public trust for private gain. We put in the NACAP, which we started to implement in 2012, and we're hoping that by 2024, through the NACAP, Ghana would have eradicated corruption to some extent. And in the NACAP, we adopted a definition for corruption to be misuse of public trust for private gain. By your reading of the survey and its outcomes, what will be your impressions on the matters of corruption that needs most urgent attention? Let's begin with Mr. Daniel Domelovo.
Okay, thank you very much. And let me also stand on the existing protocols. I must say, when we were at the backstage, somebody asked me whether I know Prof, and I said, he's the dean of the faculty of troublemakers, and I'm a faculty member. So I'm very happy to be with my dean and to create more troubles. The truth of the matter is that I think the survey or the results or the findings of the survey actually reflect what is on the ground. Some call it perception, that is perception. But I'm very sure that if you will be honest with yourselves, you have all encountered corruption face to face in Ghana. It's not just a matter of perception, isn't it? I hope you have all seen a gentleman or a lady who has one pair of shoes, 2 trousers, 1 shirt, appointed into office. Within a year, he's now a very rich guy, driving 4-wheel drive all over the place. His house has metamorphosed into a story building and everything. We can all see corruption around us. So the truth we have to speak to ourselves as Ghanaians is that we are corrupt. Why I say we are corrupt is that most of us who even see corruption do nothing about it. We are unable to say that, my brother, at least how did you go about this? And from my point of view, until we reach a point in Ghana where we push corruption to a level where people say it's not worth going there, we are not going to make any good progress at all. What am I talking about? A lot of people have gotten away with abuse of public funds and public offices. We know it. And so it creates the appetite for others to also join to do the same. But if we can really enforce our laws, we have the laws. Many times we tell about, let's have laws. Yes, I agree. Personally, I would recommend that we improve on some of our laws. But what we have at the moment, if we can implement them, I think Ghana will be what the accounts refer to as Krabewe, a place where people would like to come and see what is happening. But that is not happening. So the truth of the matter is that people have gone into public office not because of their burning desire to serve the nation, not because of any skills or competencies that they have, but because it is an opportunity to also improve upon their personal economic recovery programs.
Right. So this survey confirms for you what is reality and not a mere perception.
Largely, it confirms what is on the ground, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you very much. We'll come and you can get ready for him to take us into a lot more of, examples, real examples of what is going on. Now, Clara, so I did make reference to the National Anti-Corruption Action Plan we set for ourselves, and we started to implement 2012 and said by 2024, we are setting that we would have dealt hefty blow to acts of corruption. By your reading of this survey and the results, the perception is still widespread. What's wrong with that still?
I wouldn't say that the perception is widespread. I would say that the corruption is widespread. Because there's been a lot of research and the findings have been consistent on corruption. Recently, we did another research into administrative corruption with respect to the business registration industry, under still sponsored by the EU, Star Ghana, and under the auspices of private enterprise federations. The findings were clear. Corruption is very high. And the reasons are also clear. Now, a lot of the state agencies provide essential services or services that the people need. A lot of the time, there are delays across board. And once there are delays, people want to access the services, they are going to pay briberies to access it. So I'm not surprised that the survey here lists bribery as the highest in terms of corruption. Because you look at the cost of the delay, you look at the cost of paying the bribe, and then you pay the bribe. What I always notice is that it's interesting, when you go to a lot of the administrative agencies, they will give you reasons why they cannot provide you the service in timeously. Interestingly, as soon as you pay a bribe, those reasons no longer exist. And then they get you the service done within the time frame that they want, which means that it was possible to get the job done. I also acknowledge the resource issue in terms of staffing and then, of course, financial resources and other resources. But is it that people do nothing about corruption? No. People, some of them would want to complain. But it's not just about knowing where to complain or filing a complaint. What becomes of the complaint after it has been filed? There are a lot of situations across board that people file complaints, nothing comes out of it. They spend a lot of money going through, following through the complaint system. Nothing happens, so they just give up. We also reviewed the service charters of some of the administrative agencies. One, they had some lapses which wasn't going to help them in terms of their service delivery. For example, it doesn't specify the specific fees for the services provided. That means that members of the public do not know what the fees are, and it's easier to demand unauthorized fees. The complaint mechanisms, not very effective. If we are serious about corruption in all of the state agencies, we would have to, one, separate the complaint mechanism for corruption differently from other complaints. So we have two complaint systems, one for other complaints unrelated to corruption, and then other complaints that relate solely for corruption. And we wouldn't achieve anything. If the mechanisms are there, the reports are made, nothing comes out of it. People will just very soon get tired. The Honorable Chairperson for the Public Accounts Committee made a comment about the institutions that they make recommendations and nothing happens. Honorable, I have a suggestion, and I have said it before. You have the power of contempt. I think that the proper use of power of contempt lies in that area. That when you compel people to come before you to provide documents, heads of state institutions, and they don't do it, that is when the power of contempt should be exercised. Now, if they continue not to meet your recommendations, I don't see why you continue to approve their budgets. If you give them recommendations, they don't apply, comply with the recommendations, why do you still continue to approve their budget? So I think that is what Parliament can do. I think that is a better use of the power of contempt rather than monitoring what people say on radio and then hauling I actually think that's an abuse of power.
All right. So Clara beginning right there and plunging into the deep, that it is not a matter of perception of corruption being widespread by as many as 90%, but it is corruption that is widespread. And she begins right away to give us the solutions, how to tackle them. Now, Professor Dare, as far back as 1970, we discovered that this was the same situation. So we set up the Justice P.D. Enin Commission to inquire into the prevalence of corruption and why it is that the Ghanaian society was so corrupt. By your study of this research, does it confirm that we have made any progress?
Well, thank you very much. There's no doubt at all that we haven't made much progress. There have been certain periods where corruption appeared to have been held at bay, especially during the early years of PNDC. But then soon, the soldiers and everybody came to know that the thing is there for chopping. So there's no doubt, all the evidence, and I like what my two colleagues have said, that I think we must move away from talking about corruption perception and accept that there's endemic corruption and that we should focus our attention on what to do about them. A German Kierkegaard did a study long ago, and it's still valid. He says there are three things that define corruption in every society. The first is the opportunity. At this moment, we know that the opportunity to be corrupt is so high. For example, if a public official doesn't have any constraint as to the time he should deliver a service, and if he didn't deliver a service, he must be made accountable. When I was a young officer at the Investment Promotion Center, a study showed that at that time, if you went to clear something from the Tema port, you went through 52 steps. And the other day I was mentioning it, and I didn't know that the Namibian ambassador was in the audience. When I was head of the UN system in Namibia, if you cleared something from Varvis Bay, you went through only 4 steps. So we must look at the opportunities, the bureaucracy that we have created. The second has to do with the likelihood that when you are corrupt, you will be found out.
Yeah.
And that is very, very, very important. And we may have to look at even our laws so that we can say that the giver and the receiver are both to be punished. After all, the police know that in criminal cases, you can make somebody a state witness and making him a state witness for lesser offense. I believe that we must look at our laws and make it easier for those who are corrupt to be found out and punished. And the third, of course, is that the sentencing for corruption should be severe. I personally think that we must come to a point, and we have arrived at a point, whereby the average Ghanaian, including myself, must be asked to explain their source of wealth. And I think it's so important. When you go to other jurisdictions, they are not angels, whether Europeans or Americans. But if an American starts a project which does not accord with his earnings, it's not the police that will go after them. Immediately, the revenue department will be alerted, and then they will be looked at. Where did you get your money and other things? And through it, things will be found. Of course, that doesn't mean that corruption is not there. So we must see how we cannot be in a situation where some, as we were saying, some can become so rich overnight. And we are saying, unless you can prove that they are corrupt, they can get away with it. Right. And so we must probably look at how our criminal code and our investigations and make it simpler.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, back to you, the Auditor General, because you are the one who investigates matters by way of the work that you are supposed to do, and you are able to see the live cases of how corrupt acts manifest themselves. Our focus for this discussion is to look at the manifestations in other means, including acts like cronyism. Transparency International's very latest corruption index, looking at the military as in defense systems of the country, an area we hardly speak about, shows that of all the countries in Africa, 47 countries, out of the 47, the scorecard beginning with a green, meaning that you are low, you don't have any risk. None of the 47 African countries scored an A, which is green. None of them scored a B, as in they are moderates in the risk. All the African countries began with D, E, and a majority in F. That is critically at risk of being corrupt. Until recently, we didn't know that a Director General at the level of the police service could be the one behind the syndicate for recruitment, taking money directly into his pocket. We have heard of cronyism in the army and how the recruitments are done. Abuse of public office for private gain. How does it manifest itself from the work you do?
Thank you very much. Let me say yes, very unfortunate for the police and the army, but it is throughout the public sector. Once you get into office, in fact, your whole clan has gotten admission. Now, this is my nephew, that is my niece, this is my brother, this is my... It is a problem that we may have to talk about. Recently, I came across an issue like that. A lot of people blow whistle and etc. to me, where a member of a board, by becoming a board member, has recruited 3 of the children into the organization for which he is the board member, and was bringing another 2. So it's going to be 5 children of his in the same organization. When I reached out to the person, he didn't even see anything wrong with it. It's an opportunity which has come. So, to be honest with you, cronyism, nepotism, all those things are the bane of what we are suffering today. Like I started on, I think the requirement or the prerequisite of occupying any position or recruitment into the army, police, etc., should be on merit. That should be the common denominator. Do you qualify? Then you go. So like Prof said, very rightly so, we must put systems in place to remove the discretion from it. To say, go through the contest. Once you meet this criteria, you go. If you don't meet it, you go and find your own levels. If we don't do that, our public service, and I would not like to limit it to the police and the army. Let me be very frank with you. I sympathize many times with the police. Because you see, like Honorable said, you saw them on the road. That's why you saw that. But those who have locked their door and you are with them in the office, who will see them? You will never see them. And the policeman may have to take about 100 times or 200 times before making coming to the level of. So I think recruitment into the public service, we should be able to streamline it. But a bigger debate I've been asking for is the public service itself. What type of public service do we need as a country? And whenever that question comes to my mind, I get confused because I wonder what kind of public who serve the public or the people who public serves. Because you look at the public servant, he doesn't look like a servant at all. He is a master of public. He's never a servant. You get the point? So as a people, we should ask ourselves, if you want to be an auditor general, what do you require of you? If you don't meet that, don't come near. If you want to be the inspector general of police, what do you require to be there? Or if you want to be recruited into the army, what is required of you? We must define this and stick to it. And thank God, like he said, there are systems all over the world we can copy. This is why I'm not many times a sympathizer of non-performance.
So is it really about systems and the lack of systems?
Two things. One, we lack systems. Even when we have systems, we copy the system and paste it wrongly. So when even the owner of the system sees it, you won't be identified with the system. That is one. Secondly, we don't enforce laws. Lack of discipline. In fact, if you put systems in place and there are no consequences for violating the rules, conniving, etc., that system will be breached. It will be killed. Connivance, collusion can always beat any system. So the second thing which goes with system is enforcement of the laws and the rules.
I think, Clara, you began on a similar point by giving us what shows us the height of all of this situation, about the failure of the systems themselves, and therefore one being inclined to want to drop that brown envelope and have a service done for them as quickly as possible. So what is it? What do we do?
As for what we do, there's a lot to do, but I always say that we have to begin with the small steps. I think part of our problem is that we always ignore the small steps and then we focus on something higher. Then by the time we are done with that, there's no foundation. So we are just back to
But you said
one.
it yourself.
Yes.
I need a service. I'm being delayed. The postponement continues.
Yes.
The very day I part with the brown envelope, the service is delivered.
Yes. That's why I say that and the system is there. So if we are going to tell people, don't pay the bribe, we are not being realistic. We have to ask people to do what they can do, which is reasonable. It is not unreasonable for them to be denied the service. So if you are going to tell them to keep being denied and not pay the bribe and remain not getting the service, it's not going to happen. It's only human. I think apart from the systems, yes, we need better systems, but our problem is not just a system issue. It's also, to a very large extent, a value system issue. Now, we haven't inculcated or developed the values that support those kinds of systems. For example, there is no lack of laws as to what is the right thing to do and the consequences for not doing it. So there is no lack of consequences. But what happens? Does it actually happen? No. We preach a lot of the time and we don't do what we preach. So we talk about merits and all of that, and nobody is ready to do merit. So of course, people begin to realize that, look, focusing on your merit is not going to get you very high. So they just become human beings and do what they need to do. I think, yes, we need the systems. We also need the values. It is here that I think two things, leadership and the legal framework. Now, why do I say the legal framework? I always say that when I was a law student, I've said it several times, I loved our Constitution. Sovereignty resides in the people. All public institutions must exercise their powers for the welfare of the people. That's what the Constitution says, people's constitution. But when you go into the practice, it is really a powerless and helpless people.
Exactly.
So, like Auditor General said, we have created a system where the public really serves the servant. And why is that? All the power is concentrated, really, the people that public institutions know they ought to be accountable to in reality or otherwise something happens is the politician. Now, if public institutions don't serve the public well, the public may file complaints. A lot of the time, nothing is going to come out of it. But politicians can do something about it because of the way we've fashioned our laws. So I keep making the point that it is time we take another look at the 1992 Constitution. It has served us well. It has brought us to where we are. But that legal framework needs to be revisited. Because apart from securing votes, which is that we vote every 4 years, when it comes to real accountability and real power and capability of the citizens to hold public officers accountable, it's not there. So I think we need to rework the accountability bit. With our democracy has to come with accountability. Otherwise, we are not going to get the benefits.
So the point of my reference to you about what you had said earlier was that is the citizen or the ordinary person who perhaps is not in public office but is seeking the service not playing a bigger part in promoting this abuse of the office, in promoting the extortion? Because I'm seeking a service, I'm not getting it, someone is demanding money that will go to their private pocket, and I go ahead and pay
What options
when
do
I am
you
not
have?
supposed to pay.
What options do you have? That's the reality of the issue. I always say we can't pretend that corruption is all about the public service. The public service is the end beneficiary of corruption, but who is the supplier? The supplier side is the private sector. So when it comes to the issue of corruption, we can't just be pointing fingers only at the public side, because somebody is supplying the bribery, and that is the private sector.
So what should the supplier do? Because they are in a position of lack of power.
That's why one of we can begin, for example, some of the small steps, the service charters that the institutions have. But we need to improve. The ones that we reviewed, we need to improve a lot of them. And part of, like we said, I pointed out earlier on, the service charters must indicate the fees. It must be accessible to all the public. It must have complaint mechanisms that members of the public know. So there's nationwide education. When they trigger the complaint mechanism, there must be a solution to the problem. The service charters must indicate timelines within which the services are to be provided. They must state the responsibilities of the employees and the responsibilities of the private sector accessing the service. So it is very clear what is expected of the public employee and what is expected of the private sector. And they know they have a right to it. They are not being done a favor. It's their right. And that if that right is denied them, there will be consequences. And that consequences is the complaint mechanism I talked about. But if, as usually happens, we just make a nice document, put all the nice and the right things in it, and it remains what it is, a document that goes to sit somewhere, nobody does anything about it, the public is not educated on it, we are really, 2024, we will be back where we are, which is we wouldn't have made much progress. So if we want to, we have to be committed, like Prof said, we have to admit that we should stop talking about perception. I mean, it's real. Now, if it is real, do we really want to do something about it? And how committed are we to do something about it? Until that is done, I don't think we are going to.
Okay, so just hold on briefly there. And Professor Dad, the 3 points you refer to seem to summarize the problem. And you refer to the last to be the opportunity to provide a solution. That's the severe sanctions. Number one, you say the opportunities exist. There is the bureaucracy that allow and promote corruption. Number two, you also talk about an opportunity where I know that when I do it, I'll escape. I will not be found out, and even if I'm found out, what punishment is going to be meted out to me? But let's bring it back to the question of abuse of office, nepotism. We have the members of parliament. He, for example, just spoke to us. We know that their constituents consistently disturb them, quote unquote, to find places of employment for them. And they would circumvent the rules and the codes to ensure that they find them places. When it comes to recruitment into public services, we know that it's a fact that this is what they engage in. How can we stop that?
I think that if you look at the study, there's something about the average citizen has reached a point whereby he feels paralyzed. But this is where only the NCCE, but opinion leaders and NGOs can help educate people. Because honestly, I'll say that most of the people whom we think are in a power and you can't do anything at all, when anybody stands boldly, they are vulnerable. So there's a need for some civic education in that regard. For example, if I am in a job and somebody has brought 3 of his children, I will not even wait to go to the Auditor General. I remember in one situation, when I was a bit younger, I had to tell somebody, you cannot do it. And it's a big man. You cannot do it. Finish. And he knew that if he did attempt, he would be in trouble. So we must identify a few people and strengthen them. I was giving a talk in Kenya some few years back. In one of my books, I said that on leadership, that this country requires only 200 people who want to stop corruption or change, and the change will come. When I gave the talk in Kenya, some older, I was then younger, came to me and said, young man, you don't need 200. You need only 50. And on a reflection, do you think that if we have 50 Domilevus in Ghana, he will not be singled out as he is being singled out? So that there's also the issue of values you mentioned. Actually, I have a big concern because the values are being eroded to the primary school. Do you know that the average parent, and that's where we should be working at, in Ghana, is prepared to pay bribe for their children to cheat at BECE? That is the lowest level. And I have a school in my village, secondary school, to help the community. People come with 1111, that means they are A star. When we give them basic test, someone could not even write the name of his village, and yet held a BECE certificate. But I really, and let us call spade a spade, the cause of corruption should be traced to leadership, period. And here, we are not talking about generic leadership. We are talking about the executive and parliament. They are accountable for the corruption that we have in Ghana. And the fact that they have, they will say all things. I know the pressure on them. I mean, an MP is supposed to pay everybody's school fees. An MP is supposed to go to a funeral and I don't know how to have 1,000 cedis. But they hold the key to the corruption because leadership is cause. Everything else is effect. They are the people who appoint when, they have so politicized it. sometimes it becomes very serious that the two sides talk about relative corruption of their regimes rather than dealing with corruption. And I think that especially academia, and this is where I get a bit worried with my fellow academics, who don't have to fear, must stand up and be counted. The government has pays about how many? Over 20,000 university lecturers relatively well, and they won't talk. And they make it appear as if they are people who will not lose their job. And I think that we should build a constituency in Ghana which would then demand accountability for the leadership, because then they will easily cascade down. The last point I would like to make in this has to do with the system. Systems are very important. You must design your system to suit your problem. For example, I mentioned the BECE, so let me use it. If you generate, and I know that I'm saying this because the Deputy Minister for Education, for basic education, is working on it, so it's not too original to me also. Whereby every student, their standard, if you are doing American SAT, every student is generated. So what you are doing and what another person is doing is not the same. So you can build a system whereby when you go to a classroom, 30 people in a room taking examination, the examination is of the same standard, but everyone is different. That immediately makes that somebody in WAEC cannot leak it. And we can have a system which I found in a village whereby each student pays 60 Ghana cedis when they are going to do the BECE. 10 cedis for the police, 10 cedis for the invigilator, 10 cedis for the district education office. And so when they go, and if anybody wants, in my school, in the Ghana Christian International School in Sota, 1 year they did BCE, and we don't do BECE. If you send your child, she should go straight to WASI. And the reason is that my children were so traumatized for not sharing their answers that they required a psychologist for about 1 week to deal with them. In other words, the norm is that cheating. So we must really tackle this with all seriousness.
And the example from the education sector at the very basic level is quite frightening, isn't it? If at that level, this is what will go on, then what else can we expect when the children begin to proceed and move up? You are watching or listening to the national dialogue by the NCCE on public accountability and abuse of office. We're coming to you from the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences. And we will make time to pick some questions from you, and remember that our focus is on the things that each individual we do to contribute to corruption, particularly in the areas of nepotism, cronyism for our private benefit. At the traffic intersection, have you not given that police officer, the proverbial 1 CD or 5 CDs before? Why did you choose that option when you knew that that was wrong? So let me get back to you, Clara. And if I get to the traffic, I have offended the regulations, and a police officer stops me, why should I feel it is better to part with 5 CDs, 10 CDs, or sometimes 2 CDs or less, than go to the appropriate quarters where they will take me to, and for me to go through the process? Why should I do that?
One of the easiest one is trust. most likely you don't trust the institution they are taking you to. And then you don't trust that they will deal with you fairly. So you make a cost-benefit analysis. It's reasonable human behavior. That's why I say we cannot ask people to be martyrs. We have to put in systems that recognize that human beings are human beings, and given the opportunity, they will do the wrong thing. So we have to work at it, but we can't keep preaching at people. If you tell people that if you get arrested, don't pay the 5 cedis, you let them take you through the process, the person being a reasonable human being will just make the cost-benefit analysis. And the reasonable thing to do would be, part with the 5 cedis and then proceed. So that's the reality on the ground. We have to deal with the systems as we talk about, and not just the systems, without the appropriate value system and the appropriate leadership.
You spoke about the value system.
The value system, yes.
Professor Ademens spoke about the value system, and it appears that is at the core. Then he added to that, you just mentioned leadership, he added to that and said that the cause of corruption should be traced to leadership.
That is true.
The chairperson of the NCC pointed us to Article 35(8), which says the state shall take steps to eradicate corruption or acts of corruption, or practices of corruption. Is it really the case that leadership has not done enough?
Who is the state, and what are the steps that leadership has taken to eradicate corruption?
For example, recently we have passed the OSP bill, OSP law.
What has it achieved so far? It's too early to talk about it, but the point about achievements, but the point I'm trying to make is that I think if you look at our history since 92, what we do very well is passing laws and setting up institutions. When we have a problem, we think that, let's just pass a law. So, we have this problem, let's pass a law. Then we pass the law. After that, let's set up this institution. Then we set up the institution and we go to sleep. The work doesn't really get done. The problem remains. And then we set up another institution in a different way to deal with the same problems. So yes, we do need to pass laws. Yes, we do need to set up institutions. But we should know by now that alone doesn't solve the job. Getting the work done in a manner, in accordance with the laid framework and the value system is what will do the job. If otherwise, no, we are not going to make much. And just before I forget, on the issues of MPs, for example, we have a constitution that states the duties of an MP. We haven't given our people education as to what an MP does. So the MP makes all kinds of promises to win elections. The people, a lot of them really don't know what the job of an MP is. They think, okay, if I elect somebody that I know, then the benefits come personal, which is that you go and ask for a job and then the MP with their influence and power can fix you here and there. That is why I say we have to go back to the basics. The basics include proper education. Here, I think the NCCE actually has a lot more work to do. If you look at the public education level of our public, their civic awareness, we can't say we've achieved much in terms of educating our citizens in respect of the basic issues. By now, since 92, all of our citizens should have been aware what an MP's job is. So that if they are electing an MP, they are electing someone who can get the job of an MP done. Not just someone who attends funerals. Because we know it's not about funerals.
But the MP in his campaign has gone to say that if you elect me, A, B, C.
Yes. That is true.
And if he doesn't say so, they will vote for his. So I agree with your education.
Education.
And then they must help and not go and promise what they cannot. Please
just
go
to finish the
right.
So if the people were educated and they knew the job of an MP, if the MP goes to say, I will do A, B, C, D for you, the people know that that's not your job. And that is how they can hold their MP accountable. If you are going to hold a person accountable, you should hold them accountable in accordance with what work they were supposed to do, or they were entitled by law to do. But when we say accountability and we are really using different yardsticks from what the law provides, we are not going to
Thank you. So Mr.
much.
Daniel Damelovo, getting to the core about values, because it boils down to the value system. what can the citizens do, the ordinary people? What can we also do? Once we trace corruption to leadership, we have a role to play. For example, clear example, in the discharge of your duties, you were supposed to issue surcharges and disallowances. It took citizens represented by Occupy Ghana to go to the Supreme Court to insist that that sole duty of yours ought to be performed to perfection. Rules were made. You have used them. On the basis of that, you have been properly empowered, and you are, as it were, protecting the public purse by securing a lot of money that was stolen. What should the citizens be doing on issues of cronyism? We have heard of boards, various institutions. Apart from the winner takes all in the politics, the people who get to the boards must come from, because of friendship or because of some classmate or things of that nature.
Thank you very much. Let me express my view here. I may disagree with some of the positions you hold. I'm not undervaluing value systems at all. I think the ethics and etc. are very important. But take that same Ghanaian who is wrongly trained in school, send him to Europe, and see the change in behavior overnight. No orientation, nothing. He become a disciplined guy. Right. He obeys time. He works till the time that he has to do everything. Let me give you one quick story about this. I have a colleague of mine who picked me from my house to the airport. We were going to London together. And then when we arrived the next morning, the sister brought the vehicle and he took over the steering wheel again and was driving. After 30 minutes, I asked him, he's called Nana. I said, Nana, what has changed? And he said, why? I said, the way you were driving yesterday, if you were driving like that today, you would have killed 10 people. So why have you become all of a sudden a gentleman? He said, the system here will not allow us.
And it's the values of those people, because you have to fit in.
And so I asked the question, why would the system not allow us, but it will allow you in Ghana? I say, in Ghana, when the police stop you, you roll down your window and say, do you know me? Then you go. I said, try that here. He said, you will be killed. So the point is that there are systems in place and there is enforcement. It's not people. In fact, somebody, because of him being the nephew of a minister, he's even above a police officer. You can't arrest him because he knows a minister. The district chief executive is the brother. So he's above the law. We are looking at people, not systems. We are not enforcing things. That's the point where I feel sad, to be honest with you, and I agree with you on our constitution. When I read the constitution at times, I feel sad. Like I look at Article 202. I hope you know what it's about. The IGP operates under the direction and control of. Right. And I say, what? My goodness. Give him independence and get the right person over there, and let's see the type of police we have. I have worked outside Ghana before, and anytime you come across police outside Ghana, they commend our police that your guys are very good. But back home, we can only condemn them because they have been tamed. So that is part of the problem. Now you hit a very important issue about the role of the civil society. And 2 years ago, we actually celebrated 2 years of Occupy Ghana versus Attorney General, where Auditor General was instructed by the Supreme Court to do his work. That is what I think is needed from the civil society or Ghanaians. If I am the Chief Director of Ministry of Agric and I'm not performing, call me to question. In fact, at forums like this, let's bring some of them to explain. What are you doing towards education? What are you doing on our roads? Look at the roads that we are using. How much money? In fact, some of them will tell you that, oh, the budgetary allocation, they gave me 70%. And then you people become sympathetic. But if you probe the 70%, what he did with, he should be jailed. They don't feel accountable. And because of entitlement and chronism, I don't know, police forgive me, but I don't know whether they have been told some people are above the law, they can't tackle them. And if we have a system where we treat you because of who you are or who you relate to, then we are not going to get anywhere. We must put the system in place and enforce it. That's what Prof said, that if we have a system which can easily get you into trouble, that is, there's transparency, we can find you out, and the consequences are there, I believe that we can all make a progress. But the school one is disturbing. I had the chance of delivering a lecture at Cape Coast University, and I was struck when they sang their anthem and they said they are the teachers of the nation. So I said, you have been teaching us all this bad behavior then. Because students come out as an employer. You see first-class students, and you're like, oh, this is the type of people I want. You speak English and you want to respond in Twi. Because the English is not there. So how did you get your first class? Second class upper, and he can hardly write a sentence. And so the whole system has to be looked at. Okay. But let me go back to my point. Is that if there are no consequences for misbehavior, people will continue to misbehave, even if they are knowledgeable, even if they know what to do, they will still misbehave.
All right. Thank you very much. So I'll invite some of you, if you have questions, to move forward this way for the purposes of the camera, for the cameras, and then we can take your questions at this point. Move this way, this direction. The gentleman here is holding a microphone, and we'll give it to you to field your question. But Prof, Clara just mentioned that the NCC has a lot of work to do. It's become such a hackneyed expression. Everybody says, NCC, NCC, NCC. And we know that the NCC is one of the public institutions that is most starved of resources. And thanks to the European Union, they're able to put together a survey and have this dialogue. Whilst they do this from the little they are able to mobilize, the MP you mentioned goes back to his constituency and tells of his duties, to include that he will bring some factory to the place, that he will create a dam at the place, that he would construct a road when he doesn't have this, that he will give them jobs when that's not part of his job. What exactly do we expect of the NCC in that direction?
First of all, I know that Honorable is here. One of the fundamental mistakes which the Parliament of Ghana made and the government of the day is to give an MP part of the common fund.
I agree with you.
So
very much.
Now people look at you that you have a common fund, you are our bank. And but now they are holding on to it. They will never give up. So I think that there's no doubt at all. I believe that the NC...
Please, can you stress on that point for me? You are saying that we should take away the money from the MP by way of the common fund and then do what with it? Perhaps give it directly to the constituency, like this administration promised, one constituency, $1 million,
actually, that
something
money,
like that.
That money belongs to the constituencies because they have to go ostensibly to justify it and then use it there. And they are members of the local assembly. So therefore, there's no reason why a member of the assembly, by being an MP, you are a member of the assembly, isn't it?
Yeah.
Should be given another money separate. Okay. As soon as you do that, I believe that, first of all, that's what has gotten the MPs in trouble. Because the people think that you have money, and the money is not that big, but it gives them trouble. But on that point, I believe that, and probably I'm going on a beaten horse, we have sufficient money in the nation to fund all the needs of NCC. It's a small institution. And if you give them, I'm sure your budget will not be even 30 million cedis. I just wanted to shock you by mentioning 2 million. I mean, to give National Commission for Civic Education 2 million cedis to educate the whole of Ghana on civics. And I'm saying this because I run schools. Even my small gimpa, small, you are talking about 30 millions and over. So I think that it is a deliberate attempt to make sure that the NCCE does not work. And that is not the government of today. The governments of today don't want, if anything at all, they would like to give the money to the Ministry of Information because it is their propaganda machinery. That's all.
All right.
Start with the last. I don't think that, honestly, it is not true that people get bribes because they are not paid well. Everybody must disabuse their mind about it. I mean, you were talking about the police during the single spine. Their salaries were I think doubled or tripled at once, and the following day the behavior was the same. And much of the corruption is, we have petty corruption and grand corruption. The grand corruption are not taken by people who are poor. Those who are stealing the millions of dollars, it's not out of poverty. So I wouldn't agree that it is that. Is it ingrained in our traditions? I think some of our traditional values contribute to that. Because there's a thin line between gift giving and corruption. And I believe that if we want to fight corruption, we should be much more strict. When I was with the United Nations, you cannot take anything more than $50, which would be equivalent to about 5 cedis in Ghanaian salary scales, without reporting it. And when you were found, you will be sacked. So, in order to fight corruption, we may have to go extra mile to make sure that certain things will not be allowed at all. I think that you wanted me to specifically talk about.
Yes. You wanted to speak to the last question.
Yes, which I have.
Yes, okay.
Right. So Wasiri was talking about this philosophies and other things. I think that, at a certain point, I always say that we have been unfortunate. When we had a military leadership, strict rulings and other things, beating people and other things, we didn't have a structure, and therefore we suffered without the benefit from it. But in order to fight corruption, we must simplify some of our systems, because so that the bureaucracy is reduced, we must set time limits for certain services to be provided. I think that, and this I would devote my heart for Baumia about automation. The more, I just 2 months ago had to renew my passport. Of course, with my cemetery flowers, if I had gone to the office, I would get some advantage. But I went to EcoBank, bought my forms, I went to the computer, and then I filled the form. They gave me a date, which was 2 weeks, because everything was. When I arrived, to my surprise, there were only about 6 people in front of me, which means that they were going by the schedule, except that, again, with my being a Ghanaian, an old man, they allowed me to be first. But the fact is that that alone has meant the computer didn't know Stephen Ade. And yet, when I went, my slot was there. And only that some 6 young men and women decided to do me a favor. So we must do all those things, and then it will improve, it will reduce the possibility.
So systems do work, and in these days we can look at, as it were, automation of some of the systems, and it will be helpful. Now, Clara, Yusuf had an issue, for example, about reviewing some of the systems, because some of the systems exist, but we just needed to review them. He points to the Whistleblowers Act. and calling for a review to take away, I suspect, reporting to a chief or other places where you do not have trust. You could report to SHRAD, you could report to the Attorney General and these various other places. Is it really about a review of some of these systems?
To some extent, yes, some reviews, and then education as well. I think one of the issues with respect to the Whistleblowers Act is that I am not sure that whistleblowers actually have a very clear understanding on the circumstances for their protection. And then they do not also trust that, in fact, they will be protected. It's one thing telling them they will be protected, and another thing, them being actually protected. If they don't feel that they would actually be protected, a lot of them are not going to utilize it. And yes, he's right that if you ask them to go and report to this person, if they do not trust that the person will protect them, in terms of at least not letting it known that they were the ones who made the report, they are not going to put themselves in the line.
But it's an option. There are several other, options.
Are they aware? That's where are the whistleblowers aware? What is the level of education among the public with respect to how the Whistleblowers Act operates? I don't think the education is very clear amongst them. So we still have that confusion. And just quickly on the traditional values, whether it feeds into our corruption. I do not think it is our traditional values that are responsible for corruption. I think people are corrupt because, one, the cost of corruption is low, and the benefit of corruption is very high. If we made the cost of corruption very high and the benefit of corruption very low, in spite of our traditional values, it's not going to come out.
What do you mean by that? Make the benefit low and make the cost high?
We talk about, for example, we say let's make the punishment high. Let's increase the penalty rate for corruption. How many prosecutions do we actually undertake? So it doesn't matter if you just amend the law as we do that. Oh, if you are corrupt, you go for life. You are going life in prison, and then nobody gets punished. Nobody gets prosecuted, or nobody gets successfully prosecuted. With time, people are going to ignore it. Even the example cited by the police that no one is above the law. We keep telling I saw even the advert here that don't the police know that nobody is above the law, madam? The truth is that the police know what I call the de jure and the de facto. They know, we say nobody is above the law, but they know that there are some people who can affect their job. Someone who can make sure that they are transferred to an area they don't want. And somebody who can make sure that their promotions are not granted. So they will look at it, and martyrs are always few. You will have the outliers who will, in spite of that fear, act. But the majority of them are human beings. So they will look at the face and then think of whether or not they want to get transferred or they want their promotion to be sat on. And then they will act accordingly, in spite of the fact that we keep shouting the slogan, nobody is above the law. So until we actually make it such that in practice, nobody is really above the law, we'll be talking for a long time.
All right. Now, there is Isaac who spoke about the emphasis on nepotism, cronyism, but it could be the case that I'm your son, and there's an opening in your office, but I am deserving, meritocracy. I can go through the process and get the job. What's wrong with that? Why are we not making a differentiation?
Well, I talked about meritocracy, and let me say that, for instance, when it comes to my profession, the auditor, there is a saying that the auditor should not only be independent, but must be seen as independent. I hope you get me. Early this year, we were going to recruit some people to audit service. And my son, who is almost a chartered accountant with masters, said, Daddy, can I apply? I said, to who? You want to apply to me? He said, but am I not a Ghanaian? I said, yes, you are a Ghanaian, but you don't qualify because I'm here. I can't employ you.
Is that fair?
It's not fair. But I explained to him, see, you may be qualified, but if I bring you here, your future is damaged forever. Because everything he does, people will not correct him, they won't teach him, you will not be the professional that you want to be, given the society in which we are. So wait, I will throw you outside there, and then you grow. When I leave in 2 years' time, you can apply, and then you come, then they will give you the tuition that it takes. Let me also be quick to add here That when we are talking about value systems in place, etc., let's also not forget that corruption is not local. It is an international business. In fact, in Egypt 2 weeks ago, I made it very clear that it is very easy for us to address the local players who are here. We can address them, say prosecute them, etc. But the international players of corruption are more serious. These ones use knives and small guns. They use long-range missiles. And it's very difficult. In fact, they can undo even governments. So when Madam said the beneficiaries are public servants, I beg to differ. In fact, the process of corruption in Africa are in Europe. They are not even in Africa. The key beneficiaries of our corrupt systems, the bad roads we are constructing, the process are in Europe or in the Western world. Look at how many $20 million contracts do Ghanaians win. Why are they not able to win? Look at the systems that are put in place for us to run. And then you see the type of people who come in as consultants, technical assistants. I'm not saying it's not good, but then they'll give you technical assistance, and you see the gentleman or the lady is actually a novice. In fact, he or she is learning, and he comes as a consultant to you. So we must have to look at corruption from a broader perspective. That's why I'm disappointed that when we started, we didn't define corruption.
I see.
What is corruption in the first place? We need to define and have the same meaning and understanding for the word. Some people, if you are richer than him, you are corrupt.
When a local contractor, takes that contract and has to give the proverbial 10%, it doesn't go to Europe. It stays here.
Yes.
And he gives the 10%, and he finds himself in a handicapped situation. He has to do a shoddy job because the money is not sufficient to do the job in the manner that we expect. I think your first answer in using your son as an example also answers the question of protocols. Is there anything wrong with protocols? Allowing space for other people so that because Professor Stephen Adair, you work at these places and that place, or you are the head of GIMPA, we should allow you a little room so that your son doesn't suffer to have access to GIMPA. What's wrong with that?
Everything wrong with that. No. If you're a vice chancellor of a school, that doesn't mean that your child should not come. But your child will have come there because
on merit.
In the list, he is number 10, and you are taking 20 transparently. That is not nepotism.
Okay.
When it is that, because he's your child, he's accepted outside the rule, 10% is reserved for these people. That is totally wrong.
Okay.
And some of us who come from the villages and never had any godfathers are very, very antagonistic. And in fact, so much so that this is a very interesting example. I was head of GIMPA during Kufuor administration. And Adu Kufuor is my personal friend. So he sent one of his nephews, say, when you go see Uncle Stephen. The child came, and I said that, you go downstairs, go and see where it is done, and they will accept you when you qualify. And when you come to GIMPA, and you come and bluff that your uncle knows me, I will fire you. So, I'd forgotten, this is what I said. After 2 years, I saw this young man around. I said, hey, won't you come and greet me? He said, 2 years ago, you said that.
Okay.
In other words, I believe that when you are in a position, you should go the extra mile and not the other way around. That my children must prove beyond doubt that they are in, and none of their students should think that they are in because they are related to you. And I think that is something, it's a standard internationally.
Okay.
And
So
it
the
must
protocol
be-
system is
It's bad.
could lead to acts of corruption, misuse of public office and all.
It is
But-
corruption.
But Clara, there's no law against it. So it is going on. What do we do?
Yes, there's no law against it. And in some of the institutions, it's actually a policy. It's an institutional policy. And then the reasons come back to what we've been talking about earlier on. Your village people know that you teach at this institution. They think that they should be able, they know that the norm in Ghana is that everybody chops where they work. So which includes members of your clan. So the expectation is that once you have this access, since that is what we all do, at least I'm entitled to benefit. So I think some of these policies are. Now the issue is, if the policy is there, we would either have to come to, that's where leadership comes in. It would take leadership to say that, no, we should not have these policies. But once you have the policies there, and like you said, it's not against the law, it becomes something. But in terms of principle, should it happen?
Okay. All right. Can we take the last batch of questions? Yes. You introduce yourself and your question briefly.
In accounting or financial management, we call internal controls. It is to ensure that we can use monies for the intended purposes and get value. That's why we have the procurement processes, we have the financial management processes, etc. But then compliance with them is the problem. I have a big problem looking at those our laws. In fact, when I was in Egypt, fortunately I was with the Attorney General, and I expressed my opinion to her. I said, if you take the Procurement Act, if you take the Financial Administration, almost all our acts have got several offenses. As a result, none of them become offense. Why don't we separate the administrative issues and say this one can be handled administratively, maybe by 1 week suspension or 2 weeks suspension with that salary, etc. Then we go in for the serious ones. Like the issue the MP mentioned, that he saw a policeman in discussion. He didn't know the policeman didn't take the money, but he thought he took the money. Anyway, the long and short of it is that in some jurisdictions, you are not even stopped. You only reach the house and you see a bail. So we should put systems in place to correct those behaviors or misbehaviors from my point of view. And if I can agree more with the head of my faculty as far as nepotism and etc. are concerned, people should not gain position because he knows you. People should gain position because he is qualified for that position. That by itself helps. I have been telling my professional colleagues that if you are an accountant and you run yourself into the position of a financial controller and you know you are not qualified, you will continuously sign checks which you are not happy to sign. Because you yourself, you know you are not supposed to be there. And if you are not supposed to be there and you are there, you do things which you are not supposed to do.
You're right.
So that is what we have to start working at. And I very much would like to say on the gentleman who's asked, what can they do as students? They can form clubs to discuss some of these issues and present their common position as children to say, adults, you have failed us. This is what we think about you. I think that may also help.
That's a good idea. So, Clara, if you can take it from the point of the role of students in the fight against corruption in the nature that we are discussing. That's from Kofi. Ima also wanted to know parents who practically force you to do a particular course because they have a certain place in mind where they want you to fit in.
To begin with what role students can play, the short answer I can give is that speak truth to power. One, if you witness the wrong thing going on, be bold enough to address it, to note that this is wrong. And of course, we know in our society, usually the age thing comes up. Be strong enough not to allow that. Know what is right And even though you are young, insist on the right thing being done correctly and report to at least the person in authority in your school. And if there's a police station close by, you can make a report to the police. And educate your friends on the right values for a good citizen that some of you already have in your school curriculum. Now the second, what was the second?
He spoke about parents that he knows are
Forcing
forcing their children to do certain courses because they know where they want to place them.
When it comes to that, I think as a society or our public system could have helped. We don't have career guidance and counseling in schools. So most of it's the parents who virtually serve that role. It would help if at least the educational institutions could ensure that we have career guidance and counseling in the schools to give the appropriate advice. When it comes to that, of course, you should be able to have a discussion with your parents. It is true that sometimes, I take myself for an example. Law wasn't, I'm a lawyer. Law wasn't what I chose to do. It was my mom who bought the law school application form, and it just so happened that I happened to be in Accra at the time the exam was being written, and I had nothing to do, so I was like, let me just walk in and write the exam. Then I walked in and wrote the exam, and here I am, and I love this. I love what I'm doing very, very well. So in that situation, my parents were right, but parents are not always right. It is possible that I could have had another passion. So a discussion one with your parents, having a career counseling department or division in the school that can talk to both parents and students would be able to help students to make the right decisions as well.
Right.
Now, when it comes to just quickly on I think automation. Automation is one of the ways to go. I always keep complaining about the state institutions that are the disconnected way they interrelate. So you go to one state institution, let me give an example, the companies registry. You have the companies registry, you have GIPC, you have all these other institutions. I don't see why another state institution would be asking someone to bring a certificate of incorporation rather than accessing it directly in the database of the companies registry. So we should have, at least for some of the issues that run common, we should be able to have a database that state institutions can interconnect, and it would reduce the incidences of the face-to-face issues, situations that provide the opportunity for corruption to thrive.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Kwabna and Akolgo had issues about integrity that apparently is disappeared from our system, particularly in the education system. But Kwabna is more concerned about the fact that the MPs and other public officers are not giving sufficient example. He drafted the code for MPs 2012, and as we speak, that has not come into effect. I just got to know sometime this week, coincidentally, that they are about to resume working on this code. So even if the MPs are not guided by any code, what is Mr. Aveji talking about? That was his question. And Mr. Aveji didn't know that the police officers here, they have a PIPS. If they misbehave, you take them to PIPS and they'll be disciplined.
Well, first of all, I can sympathize with no formal code being adopted, and I hope they will work on it. But there is no institution that has no code, because you are subject to the codes of Ghana, the laws, and everything else. We must be very careful. It's meant to have something that you can use, but everybody in Ghana has a code to live by, and that is so there's a need for this formal one. When it comes to the education, let me say that for the past 5 years, not only am I a professor at Ashasi, but when I reached 70, they decided also to make me Professor Emeritus. There is a bright light in Ghana, and that is Ashasi University. In Ashasi University, when students are doing examination, there's no supervisor. Because of our honor code is such that when they come, they sign that not only will they not cheat, but they will not allow anybody to cheat in their presence. But this is also a package. We have a leadership, we have ethical, several. So I think that we can do something in education, but again, it's a leadership issue. Patrick Ewuya is committed to that. And if any student or any teacher infringes upon that, even those who are tempted to, you are out. If a student even plagiarizes small, which you say small, you go for 1 semester. Second time, you are out of the university. So I think that we can start doing something. And when I talk about leadership, I'm not talking about only the leadership, political leadership.
Right.
I tell you that the day we get the right IGP, the police will straighten up. Period. Why do I say so? Because I was with the UN in New York, and the crime rate was like this. In their case, they appointed the head of New York police, not from the police. An educationist who had succeeded in Florida became the head of New York police, and within 2 years, crime fell by 50%. Leadership is cause. Everything else is effect. And we are talking about leadership all across, institutional leadership. That is where we should tackle, and let's start holding the leaders responsible. And because when we hold them responsible, in order to deliver, you find that they require others delivering. My last example, I can say and boast of it that when I was head of GIMPA was the cleanest place in Ghana. Clean. In my language, you say that even when your food falls on the ground, you can pick it and eat.
It still is.
And I didn't know, actually, I hadn't given any instruction. And this was after I left that somebody told me, understand that when I came there, the first month or so, I was walking and I saw some garbage on the ground, rector in my tie, which is natural. I just picked them and put them in the garbage bin. I hear the message went around, and they used to say, if you drop anything in GIMPA, Professor Dare will kill you. So I believe in the power of leadership modeling. And I'm glad that they didn't tell me till I left, because it would have gone into my head.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Shall we give a round of applause to our guests? So we have done some 1 hour and some 40 minutes or so engaging in this discussion. I need you just a minute, your very final word, a minute, as far as the way forward is concerned. Just a minute. Starting with you, Mr. Domlevo.
Thank you very much. In my view, we need to redefine this word corruption so that whenever we are mentioning it, we are very clear in my mind. I shared with you a document which is the Conduct of Public Officers, a bill which was sent to my office early 2017. I don't know where it lies now. In that bill, there are very useful things about the type of gift you can receive, a whole lot of behaviors, and the do's and don'ts. They are all written in over there.
In fact, it went to Parliament before 2017. It has been in Parliament since, I think, 2010 or 11.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, it was forwarded by the Attorney General to me in 2017, so that's what I remember.
Okay.
So if we can clearly define this and take time as a people to enforce the laws that we have in our country, get systems in place so that it is not a matter of your decision. This is you apply, by this date you get it. I think we can get somewhere.
Thank you very much. Clara.
Just briefly, as this has to be brief, I think the point I made earlier on, we have to revisit our legal framework and operational framework that actually allows the people to hold the leaders accountable. We need accountability, and not just in word, but in deed. And then, of course, the public education is very important. We need without the public education, without information, the people are not empowered. So the people have to be empowered, and they would be empowered by education, by information. We also need to make corruption a risky venture. Until it is made a risky venture, where the benefits are always high and the cost is low, we are going to have a problem. And in a nutshell, the values I talk about, all of us, you and I, we each commit, if we each decide to do our own small thing, wrong thing in our own wrong corner, we will permeate the wrong thing across society, and you won't get the right thing done.
Okay.
But if we all did the right thing in our own small corner, to a very large extent, we will be able to build the society that we want to build.
Thank you very much. And Prof, the Ashesi Honor Code is being done at Wesley Girls, but how can we get it all over so that everybody will buy in?
Well, I brought that one in because I didn't want us to end on the negative.
Right.
I believe that certain pockets are being done, bright spots, which must be recognized. I believe that, and here, maybe he has charmed me, the Deputy Minister for Education, Aduchum, is that
yes. Yes, Aduchum.
I think that his plans of how to change the system from the basic education level, which I believe is the key, whereby the amount of subjects are being reduced, but the way of assessment is going to be changed. So it's not a matter of you go and pay bribe and get BEC, and also civic education being incorporated. I believe that's a right thing. Secondly, we have Ashesi University. I'm not advertising, but because I don't need the students. In Ghana Christian International High School, we have 1,000 students who, giving their children our children, do the right thing because that is the norm. Ashesi University is there. And I think that it's a question of how to scale it up. I think that His Excellency the President has also shown some, the special prosecutor and other things, some measures are being taken place. When you hear in Ghana that there's no money in the system, and how many of you have heard it, that there's no money in the system? What it means is that our Minister of Finance is not allowing the issue largesse. So we are seeing examples, and it's a question of scaling it up. But civic education, this one, on this platform, I shouldn't be doing so, but we can have a National Commission of Civic Education with 2 million budget. And we should do more of civic education and put our money where our mouth is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so a round of applause for them and for yourselves. Your questions, your contributions have been very insightful. Thank you all very much. It's been a national dialogue, and the NCC has been doing this dialogue almost every quarter, and they do it from an empirical basis. This is a dialogue on public accountability, abuse of office. Thank you very much. I'm Samson Landi, and I have it. Thank you very much.